Gino.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks to our guests coming in today. I think it's probably safe to say there's been a lot of confusion and ambiguity in relation to Dr. Houlihan's, position in the secondment. And I think it's quite unfortunate that that's happened. I think for everybody involved. Just my first question is to Mr. Watt. Obviously, the position was tailor-made for Dr. Houlihan's, public service, and particularly in the last 2.5 years. Am I correct in saying that that position was tailor-made for Dr. Houlihan?
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
Okay. And who came up with that original decision?
So I think it arose out of conversations between Dr. Houlihan and ultimately Trinity College. That there were discussions about how we can develop this research programme, how can we develop the capacity. CMO made it known that he was intending to leave his current role, and Trinity College. They weren't the only university, but were interested in exploring how we could develop this. And then, based on the commitments to overall that the state would fund, based on, as I mentioned before, the government's commitment in this space, Trinity decided to establish this professorship, this chair. I think that's Tony will correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the broad genesis of how we got here. And we were motivated at all times in terms of trying to advance public interest and trying to advance what we thought was the best interest of the country in terms of the need for us to enhance our capacity in this space.
Yeah. And I think most people, the general public, would not have begrudged Dr. Houlihan's, secondment to, for further public health and so forth. But it's just the way it was done, it was quite shoddy in relation to the protocol, the criteria, which is important, I think, very, very important in relation to what is this kind of normal practice in relation to public servants going into secondments arrangements in relation to their salary and kind of generally kind of staying the same, the salary that they have, and going into secondment? Is that general practice?
Yeah, so normally the secondment arrangements will be that somebody would stay within the same grade or with the same salary bands. Yeah, that would be the normal approach, and that was one of the issues here. That obviously it was proposed there was no change in effect the terms and conditions of employment of the CMO moving across.
Okay. Just in regards to the monies involved, which are quite substantial, how does one come to the figure of 20 million euros, which has been bandied around? I haven't heard anybody explain how is that kind of.
I don't know really, to be honest. I presume it's 2 million multiplied by an estimate of how long the CMO would have spent in the new proposed career, and of course that's speculation. But I think it's 2 million by 10. I think is how we got there.
And obviously it was an open-ended secondment. So in theory, Dr. Houlihan could have been there for 10, 15 years if he wanted it, or even longer. Is that correct?
I think up to the normal retirement age that would be relevant. Yes.
And then obviously there would be a kind of other personnel in relation to the funding. Obviously there would be other kind of
exactly, Deputy. Like the intention would have been that this would fund. So I think that normally the term is a lead investigator or a senior investigator who would head up these research programs, and then there would be groups of people. So most of the funding would ultimately involve funding teams of people doing research. I guess that's most of the spending would be incurred.
Okay. Just in relation to Dr. Houlihan, and obviously Dr. Houlihan's been in the public eyes in the last 2.5 years in relation to the pandemic, and I think the vast majority of people would have been a lot of attention in relation to what Dr. Houlihan has done, and I think there's a lot of gratitude in relation to your role during the pandemic and others as well. But I think, and this is a kind of an honest question, has the last number of weeks left a bad taste in your mouth in relation to your public services over not only the last 2 years, but obviously much further than that?
Yes. Thanks, Deputy. Well, obviously I prefer if it didn't happen, if it hadn't happened that way, and that's clear. I'd obviously prefer to be in a different situation in terms of where this has ended up. I'll let others judge what the impact of anything I have done in over the course of the previous 15 years. It doesn't take from any of that in my view. But I just take the opportunity to say that the things that we have done as a country in relation to the pandemic haven't been things that I have singularly done. I've been visible in ways that lots of other people haven't been, but there's been enormous effort, and I can start in the department and go all the way from there to the front lines of the health services, right across the board. People visible and others less visible have played a significant role in helping to support the country's response to the pandemic. So this is not credit that I'm either wishing to or seeking to take entirely onto myself. And I did have the opportunity to say, and just when you mentioned about the open-ended, when I spoke to you at the committee the last day, to make clear that from my point of view, that was important. And the reason it was important was because if I was to say I was stepping back for a 5-year period, as some have suggested, because that's the usual period of time in department-to-department level secondments, it would create a doubt and a certainty over the potential tenure of any successor of mine. And it would probably fetter the competition or likely make the competition for a successor less attractive. So you'd get fewer people applying, and a person who was successful, the possibility of me returning would arise. So I wanted to make clear, and this is the commitment I made to the department, and it was out of respect for the role and the potential appointment of a successor, and whoever that successor would be, that I didn't have an intention in seeking to come back as CMO. Even if in the secondment terms it meant that I could, strictly speaking, if I wished to come back at some point in some other role, I wanted to be clear so that the ground could be left clear for another individual to decide to apply for the job and to know that they'd have a full and clear mandate in doing that job in the same way that I had. And I thought that was important for the role, and that's the reason that the period of time was potentially longer than 5 years.
Okay. And will you step down in July as CMO? That's your intention? That's
the intention that I announced for the reasons that I outlined earlier on. It wasn't the decision that at the outset of all of this I either wanted to make or saw myself making, but I think in the context in which this was unfolding, I believe it was the right decision for me personally, and it was the right decision to try to, if you like, help to move this issue on.
And I think if things were differently, you probably would admit this, if things were done properly in relation to protocol, you would have had that secondment if things worked out.
Well, if it didn't play out in the way that it played out in public, yes, that's absolutely the case, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.